Hi, welcome back to Missy's Imaginings. Today I thought, I'm going to stop because TV's on. We made it through our trip. It was really fun. We went up to Seattle and my daughter drove pretty much, well, the whole way there. I navigated. She drove in downtown Seattle, did amazing. So yeah, it was an adventure. I'm not sure why. So people in Seattle and Washington, if this poor old Oregonian just doesn't get it, just, roll your eyes and say, well, she's an Oregonian, she doesn't get it. Because it was amazing to me where we would be driving down a street and all of a sudden the lane that we're in, we'd come up to an intersection and it would disappear, and in front of us it would have a big sign that says do not enter or bus lane only, and we'd have to turn and keep going around blocks. And then the navigation system in my daughter's car kept saying you are not on a recognized road. So I don't know, maybe we were on the sidewalk, I'm not real sure. But then we'd want to turn left, but we couldn't get in the left turn lane because it would be full of parked cars. So I don't know, maybe that's just the way they do things up there. But it was fun. It was an interesting trip. We stayed at the Moore Hotel, and it's connected to the Moore Theater right on 2nd Street. So that was really fun. It was very convenient. So we just had to walk down the stairs and around the corner to the venue. So that was really fun. While we were there, we happened to look out the window, and so for all you Dan and Phil fans out there, their bus was parked right underneath our window, so that was kind of fun. We spied a little bit to see if we could see anybody going to and from the bus, but it was mostly just people who are working and part of the show production team. So, but we didn't get to see them. But anyway, it was a fun trip. The show was really good. I might edit that trip and post it later, but I don't know. There's a lot of silliness and driving, and I don't know. Probably not very many people would be interested in it, but it was fun to do. And I don't know, I might put in a couple pictures here and there so you can see our trip. But anyway, moving on, we are going to go ahead and sew a pair of pants today. A while back in one of my earlier videos, we drafted a pants pattern for the tall resin sole male. This is the 70 centimeter resin sole male body, the real slender, real skinny guy, who has the David Tennant head sculpt. And so he's going to be Doctor Who. So we did the shirt and we drafted the pants pattern. So today I thought we'll go ahead and sew the pants. Sewing a pair of pants is one of the easiest things as far as clothing to make. It's some straight seams, a couple pockets, and not much to it. So if you're a little bit hesitant about trying doll clothing, a pair of pants, sewing a pair of pants is a great way to start. The pattern is on the website and it's labeled as the 70 centimeter. So I printed out a copy. So these pieces will need to be assembled. So they look like this. So they'll need to be cut out, put together before we start cutting fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll get started. Now our pieces are assembled. So we have the pants front with the fly and the pocket. We have the pants back with the dart. We have the waistband and the inset pocket. Now to pin onto the fabric. So for Doctor Who, I have this really nice black pinstripe fabric. The stripes are very close together, so when you're looking at a doll, it's nice to have a pattern or a print or stripe that is size proportioned correctly to the doll. So this narrow stripe is going to be a perfect match for the size of this doll. Now that our pieces are all cut out, what we're going to do is, like I did before, there's going to be some things that I will go ahead and serge on the serger machine, but I'm not going to move the camera and show those. I'll just show them after they're finished. But so first we're going to get our front pieces ready by getting the pockets put into the pants. So what you're going to need to do is have your front pieces, and this fabric, you can tell a definite difference between the inside and the outside. So this is almost like polka dot lines, and then the more dashed lines is the outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to start putting in our pockets. So I noticed that part of the filming didn't work on the camera, so I've made a couple diagrams to explain what's coming up. First, what we're going to do is we're going to lay the pocket with right sides together. We're going to lay the pocket and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam where the edge of the pocket is. Once that's sewn, we're going to trim the seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch so that we trim off the excess. So with right sides together, we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, trim off 1/8 of the seam allowance. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that pocket, and along that sewn seam we're going to flip the pocket to the inside of the pants. Now that the pocket will be inside the pants, we're going to top stitch about 1/8 from the seam, or as close as you can get without going, over the edge, so it looks real nice. Then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take the pocket, and on the center line that shows on the pattern piece, we're going to fold that pocket back so that the edge of the pocket is going to line up with the side seam of the pants. And right here, this is where the right side of that fabric is going to show through. So then that will be the pocket. So we're going to fold back and line up the side seam. So now we'll go ahead and get back to what I've actually sewn. This might actually be kind of a better way to show you because the fabric is so dark. So there again is the plan. I'll go ahead and zoom in on each step. So first we line them up right sides together, sew the pocket, flip the pocket to the inside, then we're going to top stitch, then we're going to fold it back and line up the side seam. So now that's what our pocket is going to be. This is going to be the edge of the pants, and here where I put my finger, that's the pocket. So what we need to do is take the bottom edge, or the hem of the pocket, and I'm just going to run this edge through the serger to actually close the bottom edge of the pocket. So I'm going to do that on the serger and bring it right back. Now that bottom edge is hemmed and finished with the serger. So that's going to be our pocket. So this edge is going to be the side edge of our pants. So my pleat needs to be marked. So let's see here. I'm going to go to the wrong side. I'm going to move my pocket. I'm going to mark the outside edges and the inside edge for my pleat. So now I like to have the pleats come toward the center. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold so that we're folding on that center line so those other ones match, and then we're bringing that fold forward like that. And then I'm just going to tack that down. Now, with that pleat tacked down, I'm going to go ahead and take my pocket and line up the side seam, and I'm going to baste on the side edge, but it's going to be real close to the edge, staying within that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to go ahead and come all the way across, basting the top edge as well. So I'm going to go right all the way up to the corner, just because it's easier to do that than to take it in and out of the machine. Then I'm going to make sure everything's laying flat on my top edge, and I'm going to continue basting all of that flat across the entire top edge, just kind of reinforcing the top of that edge of the fabric. The next thing I want to do is I want to finish the edge of my fly. So I'm going to start about here, and I'm going to run this front edge of the fly on both sides through the serger. So now on my pants, here's the finished front pocket and the pleat in place, and then I've also finished the front edge of the fly so that that fabric won't ravel and fray. Now I'm going to do the same process to the other side of the front. My cat is interjecting his presence here. He decides he needs to help in the sewing process, I suppose. Okay, so when we're going to go ahead and put the fronts together, what we're going to do is first I sew the crotch seam about 1/4 inch just right on the seam allowance line that shows on the pattern. Then I zigzag very close to that seam, and I make that a very narrow zigzag, and I make the stitches very close together. just to kind of reinforce, because that crotch seam gets a lot of pull when you're putting the doll in and out of the pants, because that's the opening. And then once the zigzag is in place, I trim the excess off of that seam, and it all kind of goes up right to where that seam allowance would match the seam allowance from the fly as it comes down. So that's what I'm going to be doing as I put the pants together. So I thought I'd go ahead and insert that diagram as well. All right, there's our two fronts. The next part is to put these pants right sides together, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew the crotch seam of the front. So we're going to start here and come up to right where the seam would follow, and there'd be a seam allowance here. So right here where those two seam allowances meet, that's where we're going to sew to, and then I'm going to back tack there to secure that. All right, now what I like to do, just to make sure everything stays secure, is I like to take a very small, tight zigzag right in here on the inside of the seam that I just sewed. Go. All right, and now that I have that zigzag in place, I'm also going to trim the seam allowance of this seam, but being careful not to cut that zigzag. And I'm going to come up here and then cut across here to trim that out a little bit. Okay, now to finish the fly. So now our crotch is sewn together. Now on the fly, on men's pants overlap from the left. So we're going to take the left side of the front and fold that flush with the seam. So that's going to be folded flush, just like that. This side, however, we're going to take the fly on the right side and only fold it in 1/4 inch. That way, when the front left overlaps, we're going to have fabric to close out that fly so there's no gap there. So if the fabric comes, there's no big hole and no opening. So that's how we finish that out. Then I simply am going to take a seam here and then angle it down just like you see on a normal pair of pants. I'm going to try to get my stripe so that it goes up nice and straight. Be careful not to catch your other side when you do that. And here again, I'm stitching 1/4 inch from the edge. And I'm not coming all the way down to where the fabric meets. I'm up from that about 1/4 inch, and I'm going to go back about 3 stitches and forward again and take it out. So there's my seam. I should just pull that, but I'm just going to trim it. There we go. All right, now I'm going to overlap this side only 1/4 inch and stitch that down just 1/8 inch from the edge, because I'm just turning that over so that that will be nice and finished. And now with those two edges both finished, I'm going to overlap just so that I see how the pants will come straight up and line up with that line. Now I'm going to go in and make sure this is all laying flat on the inside and on the outside, and I'm going to put in that small, where's a good pin, that small little line that's going to go right there. And I'm just going to go forward and back. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, and back, 1, 2, 3, 4, and forward again. And then pull it out. And now here, if you want it to look real nice, you can go to the inside and just use those threads and pull those threads through so I can tie each pair and then trim them on the inside so I don't have any loose threads on the front of my pants. So I just, and you don't have to tie it, but it's just an extra precaution to make sure that you know it's going to stay nice and nothing's going to work its way forward. So there's that one, and then these two, and I just tie it in a simple knot just because it's just thread that I don't want to work forward. It's not holding anything closed, it's just because I already back tacked it. So there we go. Trim those out, pull those away. Alright, so now we have the front of our pants all finished. So there's the front. Now what we're going to do is the back. To sew the back, once again we're going to look to the inside of our fabric, and I'm going to go ahead and trace in the dart. And when I trace in the dart, you can do the entire line of the dart. I'm kind of lazy, so I just do the top of the dart, the two edges of the dart, like this, and then bring this up where it's positioned correctly, and fold that down, and then mark where that point is. Oh, and I break my pencil. That's always exciting. There we go. So that I have the 3 dots. And then when I go to sew the dart in, I put a pin in this dot and then come back out this dot and just push those together on my pin and then grab a hold of that point, and then I'm going to sew to make the dart. I'm just going to start up here and I'm going to sew at a diagonal line and end right here. Back tack at the beginning and ending of the seam, because that is a dart that is going to have some amount of pull on it and you don't want that to work loose. And I am sewing on, you know, the wrong side of the fabric. Now I'll do the same thing on the other side of the back. My little pencil lid is broken. There we go. There's enough where I can see my dots. Go in, and come back out at the other one. Punch that together on my pin. So the next thing that I'm going to do is now, with my backs, I'm going to sew the back crotch together. So it's going to be the center back and down to the back crotch. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to serge that edge as well. I'm not going to trim that one out. It just doesn't have the wear and tear that the front fly has. So that's why I reinforced the front and trim it out. But this one I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam and then serge that so it's nice and finished. Okay, the next step is to lay my back here, and then I'm going to put the front with right sides together, and I'm going to sew the side seams, making sure all of these threads and stuff are to the outside. So I'm going to start at the waistband and pin the side seams together. So there's one side all pinned. Once I get the other side pinned, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to run it through the serger so that it'll be a nice finished seam on the inside of my pants. Once the hems are done, the next step is to do the inseam of the pants. So I'm going to match up the inseam and start at one leg, go all the way into the crotch, and then all the way to the other end. So I always start pinning at my hems to make sure my hems are even, and then if I need to adjust any of the length, I kind of do that within the fullness of the leg. Okay, so now that the pants are pretty much put together, what we're going to do is turn them right side out. I've got the pants, they could stand to be a little bit longer, but they're not bad because I'm not going to take the waistband all the way up here, because the pants are going to ride about here, and then the waistband will be sewn on and it'll be about this wide. So about here is where we want them. It looks like the fly is going to close, and they fit great. So I don't need to make any adjustments to the darts in the back. The pleats look like, well, they look like I wanted them to. The pockets lay nice and flat. So once the waistband is on, those are going to fit. Let's turn them over so you can see the back. So here's the back of the pants, and then once again that'll have a waistband that will be sewn on here and come up a little bit. So yeah, they're going to be just perfect. So that's the pair of pants, and I'm not sure how much my battery is going to last, so we'll see if I can go ahead and film while we go ahead and put the waistband on so you can see those finished product and how they're going to look. But there we go. It's a good fit. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and finish up this pair of pants. Okay, so now that we have the pair of pants pretty much put together, we just have to put on the waistband. When I drafted the pattern, I said I always try to make sure the waistband is longer than what I'd actually need, so we'll hope that I measured that correctly. So to put on the waistband, I always fold it in half, and I find the center back of my waistband and just stick a pin there, just so that I've marked that. Then with right sides together, I pin the waistband to the edge of the pants, matching that center back. So I find my center back seam, and that's where I'm going to put the pin. I'm going to pin that onto the pants. Then I'm simply going to work my way around to the front. Now remember, since the pants, the fly, one side is extended and the other side is folded all the way in. If you come short on your waistband for some reason, you can always adjust a little bit. So this is my front that's going to have the folded back, because that's the overlapping left. So I'm going to pin my waistband on here. There we go. And you can see that it's too long, which is fine. And then I'm going to take the other side and I'm going to pin it and see if I've got enough to extend the the part of the fly that is underneath. And the darts in the back, I usually pin those darts towards the center back. So since I'm thinking about it, I'll go ahead and pin those down. And the side seams I pin towards, I think the thread got caught. The side seams I always pin towards the back as well. I'm not sure why I do that, but that's what I do. There we go, pin that dart. Side seam, I'm pinning it towards the back. And then this extends beyond that edge of the fly, so my waistband is plenty long enough. Like I say, I'd always rather have the waistband too long, because you can just cut it off, than to have it too short. So now I'm going to just sew all the way around the waistband with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm attaching the waistband to the pants. Be sure you back tack at the beginning and ending of the seam. Now this seam will be hidden inside the waistband, so you don't need to worry about finishing the edge of this fabric or serging it, because it's going to be up inside the waistband anyway. One way that I've found that I like to do, just because I like things that are easy, is I trim, so I've got a little over 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch selvage on the end. That one's right at 3/8. So I just fold it up. So this is what the waistband's going to look like where it's attached to the pants. There we go. And then sometimes you can do this sewing thing and whatever, there's lots of ways to do it, but I just like to go ahead and fold it in, then do my tuck it in like a 1/4 inch, and then fold it over again, and then that's my waistband. And then I just do a machine from the outside. I pin it in place, so I've tucked in a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I line it up with the seam where it's actually attached to the pants, and then pin it. And then when I top stitch it, I do it from the outside so I can make sure that my top stitching is staying on the waistband. If you try to do it from the inside, sometimes it can get a little wonky and pull your fabric, and then when you look at the outside of your pants, you find that the top stitching has actually gone onto the pants instead of staying on the waistband. So if there's any mistakes in my top stitching, I'd rather have it on the inside of my pants than the outside of my pants. So I pin this down, turning it a 1/4 of an inch, and then lining the finished edge with that seam so that it's nice and snug. And then the top stitching will be done from the outside of the pants, just so I can make sure that my stitching is, like I say, staying on the waistband. So there we go. Pin that. You can do this by hand if you like to have real nice finished stuff and no top stitching, which is totally fine. It's whatever you want to do or what you have time for. So I'm going to fold that in, fold a 1/4 inch down, Then match that fold with the edge there. And I'll pin it into place. And once again, my cat just jumped on my chair and clawed me. Thank you, Alice. Turn it a 1/4 inch. Kind of make sure you're pulling that seam up snug, and so that you don't have any overlap on your actual waistband. You want that to come up nice and smooth on the outside. There we go. One more, I think, should do it. So fold a 1/4 inch in. There we go. Pin that. So yeah. And then once that's done, then that's what your pants are going to look like. So then here's what it'll look like on the outside. So I'm going to sew, making sure that my thread from my top stitching is staying up on the waistband and not getting on the pants. With the 1/3 scale, because this fly is so long, compared to like a Barbie or something like that, I always put a snap up at the top, and then I also put a snap midway just to kind of hold that shut, just so you don't have a big bulge, because that is a very extensive length there, just because they're so much taller than a lot of the other dolls. Once you get into 3rd scale, and especially the 70 centimeters, they're really tall. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and top stitch that waistband on. What might work is to turn the pants back inside out. Just so they lay a little flatter. Okay, so here we have the doll with the pants on. Let's see if we can get it so we see. The waistband on is going to fit just like this when I put the snaps on. So they could stand to be a little bit longer if you're making the pants as well, and you wanted to know how that length is going to work. So you might want to add a little bit length to the pants, but there again, I made the pants exactly as we drafted them in the last video, and I didn't change anything, so that's exactly how they're going to look when you get them finished. So thanks for joining me, and happy sewing!